Before I talk about Flash-based web games, I do feel obligated to talk about Flash itself. It all started with Futureware Software working on a project called Smart Sketch, but modified the program by adding frame-by-frame edits allowing you to create animations. The software was then released as Future Splash Animator in 1995, which was a direct threat to Macromedia's Shockwave player, so they ended up buying Future Splash in 1996 and renamed it Macromedia Flash. To my knowledge, the release of ActionScript along with Flash 5 is the point when people started developing Flash-based web games. The first types of Flash games I personally remember playing were copies of older games like Pac-Man, but there was also completely original content using basic development tools. These games were mostly on-rail shooters and would consist of single-screen stages where the objective would be to kill enemies that pop up. Although these early games would be considered as crudely drawn and poorly animated, there's a certain charm about knowing that somebody spent their nights sculpting this game from blank canvases. Not for money or to appease a company, but just because they wanted to make something. The oldest browser-based Flash game I actually remember playing is called Postal by Gothic Soul. It's not a masterpiece by any means, but it had humor, pointless murder, and blood. And those would be the three food groups for many Flash games to come. Also, you could beat the game without killing anyone, but it's pretty safe to say that everyone that played the game decided to anyway, which makes a pretty big statement about the human psyche, seeing as how it's a 30-second long Flash game made by one person in the year 2000. Other classics from this era include Kill Britney Spears and other games like it, Kill the Backstreet Boys, Kill the Dudes from the Gap. Basically, any early 2000s pop culture entity got murdered via Flash games. But it only took about a year until Flash games started evolving at a rapid pace, because Miniclip launched in 2001. Shout out to old Miniclip. It gave people a place to put their games other than Newgrounds, which at the time had moved on to parody versions of popular software, along with a wave of torture games, because apparently just shooting people wasn't enough. This is also the year that a little Flash game called Diamond Mine came out, which was the beginning of a popular series called Bejeweled. You might have heard of it. Then in 2002, there were two major games to come out. The first was Adventure Quest, a full-fledged Flash-based MMORPG that became a web gaming phenomenon and still has an active community today. And the second was Alien Hominid. It was posted on Newgrounds, and the reason I mention this game in particular is because it was the first Flash game to be ported onto home consoles. And not just the three big systems either, Alien Hominid made it to virtually every device that could play video games in 2004. Keep in mind, this is the same year that Facebook came out. But if you don't mind, I'd like to flash forward... It's such a shitty pun. If you don't mind, I'd like to flash forward a few years to 2005, because that's when Macromedia was exchanged in a quote-unquote stock swap, leaving the company to be acquired by Adobe, which was an excellent decision on their part, because this is when people spent much more time and effort on Flash games because money was now involved. And there were now many popular genres of browser games, like 2D shooters, puzzle games, platformers, and most interesting, dating simulations. On top of having all these new Flash-based games, YouTube was also created in 2005, and at the time it used Adobe Flash video technology to show its content. So without Flash, you wouldn't even get to hear me talk about 15-year-old browser games like they were the pinnacle of free expression in the interactive arts. 2006 had some big Flash titles like Line Rider, Cube Field, along with Swords and Sandals, which is one of my personal favorites. But I think the golden year of Flash games was 2007, because this is when every genre in the Flash game market had a good title. You want an RPG, go play Sunny. You want a shooter, play The Last Stand. And if you were into tower defense games, oh, don't you worry, because there would soon be a cubic megaton of games to choose from, including desktop tower defense, and of course the first game in an extremely popular series, Bloons. But if none of those games interested you, then Trials 2 also came out that year, the sequel to a Java-based motorbike game that originally came out in the year 2000. The Trials series also went on to be wildly successful, getting multiple ports, but on top of all this happening, 2007 is also the year that smartphones started coming out. So 2008 is when things start to fluctuate. There were still new games coming out, like the first Gemcraft and Warfare 1917, but this is around the time that tower defense games and sequels were completely running the show. Also, by now there were quite a few Flash animations that also had decent web game tie-ins, but there were bigger problems that would soon pose a direct threat to Flash games. First of all, the free-to-play MMORPG market was absolutely booming, with a large assortment of high-quality games, plus social media was on the rise, eating up a lot of people's time in general. 2009 is when Flash games reached a turning point. Most Flash game franchises were at their third or fourth installment, however new games carved their way into the market. There was Learn to Fly and Toss the Turtle, both having the same basic concept as Yeti Sports Penguin Toss, but with upgrades. And lastly there was Farmville, which made it to Facebook and became the only reason you would get notifications on that site for about a year. This game was an epidemic, spreading to pretty much anyone who had a Facebook account. But even with the success of Farmville, the competition was also growing, with gigantic titles like Angry Birds made in Box 2D. In 2010, most of the popular games being played were ones created years before, but there were still some crazy breakout hits like VVVVVV, Robot Unicorn Attack on Adult Swim, and 8-Ball Pool on miniclip.com, along with being on mobile. But none of them could compete with the popularity of Hot Wheels at the time, which came out the same year and was also made in Box 2D. In 2011, with the way that the internet changed, people didn't really seek out new Flash games. The games would instead find them somehow. The main games of this year were Kingdom Rush because of the popularity on mobile devices, and Realm of the Mad God, which mainly got popular because of later releases on Steam. And yeah, Steam's free-to-play section came out this year, which put another nail in the Flash-based browser game coffin. But you can see where I'm going with this now. Flash games just got edged out. There was maybe one hit a year from 2012 to 2016, but as of right now I consider the browser-based Flash game market completely stagnant. The combination of smartphones, social media, and literally every other type of game you could play on the computer instead of Flash games made them pretty irrelevant, only to be played for nostalgia or when you get bored in study hall. But I do look back fondly on the great Flash games of their time. Like I said earlier, there's a certain charm about them, even if they got grotesque and had some lowbrow humor at times. They were raw and rough around the edges, but stayed authentic to what the creator wanted them to be. There was no outside influence forcing these developers to change their ideas. If they wanted to make a game where the whole point was to kill popular people or parody a particularly annoying bit of software, then that's all fine and dandy. The more gore and jokes, the better. But like all things that involve making a profit, the product got watered down, and although Flash games got more polished with time, the most popular ones ended up being the games that catered to the lowest common denominator. And hold on, look what they did to Miniclip. Look at it. But I urge you to go find more recent Flash games that have that homemade feel, and let me know about them in the comments. I'm also interested in what your favorite Flash games were, because I know I missed a lot. If you enjoy me opening the discussion on various topics in gaming such as this one, or if you're a fan of the Games You Might Remember series, then feel free to subscribe because we got loads of content coming. If you want to have a personal conversation with me, then the best way to do that is on the Daily Quest Discord, and we also have a Facebook if you're into that sort of thing. Peace out.